The afternoon sun cast its golden glow through the expansive windows of Pemberton Bistro, a high-end restaurant in Portland where wealthy clients and business executives indulged in exquisite meals and sealed deals with a firm handshake. In this atmosphere of exclusivity, where tailored suits and sophisticated conversations ruled the space, an unexpected figure stepped through the main entrance, her stride steady and unhurried. She was an older woman with dark skin, dressed in an elegant navy blue coat adorned with delicate embroidery at the cuffs. A black handbag rested under her arm, and her gaze, calm yet carrying an unmistakable dignity, swept across the room with quiet observation. She did not seek attention, yet her mere presence caused several heads to turn. However, the looks she received were not of admiration, but of confusion. The hostess greeted her with a measured smile, a politeness that felt more rehearsed than sincere. "Do you have a reservation, ma'am?" she asked, her tone neutral but brisk, as if the woman's presence had disrupted the restaurant's seamless rhythm. "Yes, under the name Mrs. Holloway," the woman replied firmly. Without another word, she was led to a table in the most secluded corner, near the kitchen, far from the restaurant's prime seating and the attentive service enjoyed by other guests. She did not complain, nor did she make a single remark, yet an unspoken tension lingered in the air. Something was about to be revealed, and no one in that room could have anticipated the impact that moment would have on their lives. The moment Mrs. Holloway took her seat, she carried the same elegance with which she had walked through the restaurant's doors. She carefully placed her purse on her lap, ran her hands gently over the perfectly arranged tablecloth, and examined the menu with the patience of someone who had long learned not to expect much. But it didn't take long for her to notice what was happening around her. Minutes passed, and not a single waiter approached her table. Around her, other guests received immediate attention. Wine glasses refilled before they were empty, dishes served with precision, warm smiles accompanied by phrases like, "How can we assist you today?" But for her, there was only silence and fleeting glances that quickly looked away. The waiter assigned to her table, a tall man in his 30s named Todd, passed by several times without even acknowledging her presence. He attended to other guests with ease and friendliness, exchanged jokes with regular customers, and even offered recommendations on the specials of the day. But when he finally stopped at Mrs. Holloway's table, his tone changed. "Sorry for the wait, we're quite busy," he muttered without even looking up from the notepad in his hand. "I'll be back in a moment to take your order." Without waiting for a response, he walked away just as quickly as he had arrived. Mrs. Holloway did not protest, nor did she show any sign of discomfort. She simply nodded with a faint smile and let time continue its course. From a nearby table, a young couple began to notice what was happening. The woman, her brow slightly furrowed, whispered to her companion, "Did you see that? She arrived before us, but no one is serving her." The man glanced in Mrs. Holloway's direction and then at Todd, who continued attending to other tables with the energy and enthusiasm he had so blatantly denied the elderly woman. "I don't know. Maybe she's just waiting for someone," he shrugged. But the woman was not convinced. She watched as Mrs. Holloway discreetly raised her hand to get the waiter's attention, only to be ignored once again. Minutes later, Todd walked past the table without stopping. Then, with the same unwavering patience, Mrs. Holloway slightly raised her voice. "Excuse me." The waiter stopped, visibly irritated, barely turning his head. "Yes, what do you need?" "I'm ready to order, if you have a moment." Her tone carried no trace of frustration, but the firmness in her gaze made Todd avert his eyes. "Of course," he replied dryly. "I'll be right back." But he didn't return. 5 minutes passed, then 10. And as Mrs. Holloway continued waiting, the tension in the restaurant grew. The young couple wasn't the only one who had noticed. Other diners exchanged glances, some uncomfortable, others incredulous. A middle-aged woman sitting with a group of friends crossed her arms and whispered, "This is ridiculous. Why are they ignoring her?" Her companion nodded, but neither of them spoke up. As in so many other moments, injustice lingered in the air, uncertain and unchallenged. Meanwhile, at a table in the back, a man in a navy blue suit observed the scene in complete silence. His fingers lightly tapped against the surface of his half-empty glass. His gaze never left the waiter, and with each passing minute his jaw tightened further. He didn't need any more evidence to understand what was happening. Elijah Holloway was not just another customer. He was the owner of the restaurant. And the woman they were so blatantly ignoring was no stranger. She was his mother. Elijah Holloway continued watching in silence from his table, his gaze sharp as a blade. Every slight, every moment of disrespect toward his mother etched itself into his mind like an unbearable weight. He was not a man prone to impulsive reactions. Over the years, he had learned that patience and observation were far more powerful weapons than uncontrolled anger. But at that moment, as he watched his mother sitting with the same dignity she had carried all her life, ignored and diminished by someone who had no idea who he was disrespecting, he felt a fire build in his chest. He pressed his lips together and took a deep breath. His mother, the woman who had taught him everything about perseverance and respect, was being treated as if she had no value. He didn't need to see her frown or fidget with her hands to know that she felt it. But as always, she maintained her composure, allowing the injustice to reveal itself. Elijah shifted his gaze toward Todd, the waiter who up until that moment had carried himself as if he ruled the dining floor, choosing whom to serve with warmth and whom to ignore without remorse. He watched as Todd laughed with a group of customers at the next table, leaning in confidently while recommending a special dish. His gestures were natural, his demeanor charming. It was clear that he knew how to do his job well. He had simply decided that his mother was unworthy of his attention. Elijah tightened his grip on the rim of his glass. In any other scenario, he might have intervened immediately. But not now. He knew it was better to let Todd bury himself. Across the restaurant, the discomfort spread like ripples in water. The young couple who had noticed earlier continued exchanging glances. The woman leaned toward her partner and whispered, "This is getting out of hand." They weren't the only ones. More customers had begun to notice. Some murmured to one another, while others observed in silence. The restaurant, once filled with lively conversations, had fallen into a tense quiet. Elijah could feel the shift in energy. It wasn't just his mother who had noticed the injustice, it was the entire restaurant. Finally, Todd passed by Mrs. Holloway's table once more without stopping. His mother looked up with her usual patience and, in a calm yet firm voice, said, "Excuse me." Todd hesitated, visibly annoyed, and turned around reluctantly. "Yes, I would like to place my order now if it's not too much trouble." The words were simple, spoken with unshakable courtesy, but the way she said them made Todd's brow furrow. "Of course," he replied flatly. "I'll be right back." Elijah saw the disdain in his expression. He saw the slight shrug, the way Todd carried himself as if his mother's request was a burden, an inconvenience to endure. And in that moment, he knew he had waited long enough. With calculated movements, Elijah rose from his seat and crossed the restaurant with the quiet authority of a man who knew exactly how much power he held. There was no need to raise his voice. No need to create a scene. The restaurant was already watching. Todd, oblivious to what was about to unfold, flinched when he sensed a shadow over him. He turned his head and met Elijah's piercing gaze. "Everything all right, Todd?" Elijah asked, his voice deceptively calm. The waiter blinked, caught off guard. "Mr. Holloway, I didn't know you were here. I've been here the entire time, and I've been watching everything that has happened." Elijah's tone was low, but there was an edge to it that made the hairs on Todd's neck stand up. The waiter tried to recover, forcing a nervous smile. "Oh, well, it's been a busy night, you know. Short staff, lots of work." "Busy?" Elijah repeated, arching an eyebrow. "That's interesting because I've seen you attentively serve other tables. I've seen you recommend dishes. I've seen you laugh with customers. But somehow, my mother has been sitting here for almost 40 minutes without so much as a glass of water." The color drained from Todd's face. "Sir, I don't want to hear excuses." Silence fell over the room. Even the pianist stopped playing, his hands hovering over the keys. Every eye in the restaurant was fixed on them. "You treated my mother as if she didn't matter, as if she didn't belong here," Elijah continued, his voice steady without needing to be loud. "And you did it in front of everyone. So now, in front of everyone, I want you to answer one simple question. Do you believe she deserves the same respect as every other guest in this restaurant?" Todd opened his mouth, but no words came out. Yes or no? Elijah pressed, his gaze unwavering. The waiter swallowed hard, his confidence crumbling. And no, sir, that wasn't my intention. But you did it, Elijah stated, and now you'll face the consequences. At that moment, Todd's fate was sealed. The entire restaurant had witnessed his behavior. Elijah didn't need to yell. He didn't need to make a spectacle. He had simply let Todd dig his own grave. Elijah turned his head toward Dana, the restaurant's manager, who had been watching with a deep frown. Dana, make sure my mother receives the best service tonight. And as for Todd, he won't be working here anymore. The order was final, undeniable. Todd, pale and defeated, lowered his gaze and unfastened his apron with trembling hands. Justice had been served without a single voice raised, and the entire restaurant had witnessed it. Elijah Holloway remained standing, his presence commanding the room with an unshakable authority. The restaurant was almost silent, save for the distant clinking of silverware against plates and the hushed murmurs of guests still processing what they had just witnessed. Todd stood frozen, gripping his apron with trembling hands, unable to meet Elijah's gaze. In mere moments, his arrogance and disregard had crumbled, replaced by a look of defeat and shame. Dana, the restaurant manager, hurried over with a mix of discomfort and determination on her face. She knew her boss was furious, but what unsettled her the most was the way he expressed it. There were no raised voices, no dramatic outbursts, just a quiet, calculated force that made every word he spoke feel like a verdict. "Mr. Holloway," Dana began carefully, "I'll personally ensure that Mrs. Holloway receives the service she deserves. This will not happen again." Elijah studied her for a moment before nodding slowly. He knew Dana was a competent manager, that she didn't share Todd's prejudices, but that wasn't enough. Not this time. "It won't happen again isn't sufficient," he said, his voice low but firm. "This isn't just about one waiter's mistake. It's a symptom of something deeper. A problem in the culture of this restaurant, in the way some of my employees believe they can treat certain customers differently." Dana swallowed hard and nodded. "I understand, sir. I'll make the necessary changes." "Yes, you will," Elijah confirmed. Then he slowly turned back to Todd, who hadn't moved a muscle, his shoulders drawn inward. "But first, there's something I need to make clear." Elijah took a step forward, closing the space between him and Todd, who barely managed to meet his gaze before quickly looking away. "Tell me, Todd," Elijah began, his tone dangerously calm, "at what moment did you decide that my mother deserved less respect than any other customer in this restaurant?" Todd's mouth opened, but no coherent answer came out. "Was it when you saw her walk in?" Elijah continued, leaving no room for excuses. "When you noticed her age, the way she dressed? Or did you simply assume she wasn't worth your time?" "Mr. Holloway, Todd stammered, but Elijah raised a hand, silencing him immediately. "I don't want excuses. I don't want justifications." His voice hardened. "What I want is for you to understand the gravity of what you did tonight." Elijah turned slightly, sweeping his gaze across the restaurant, where many diners were watching in tense silence. "What happened here wasn't just bad service," he said, now addressing everyone. "It was an act of disrespect. A choice to treat someone with less dignity simply because you assumed they didn't matter." The weight of his words hung in the air. Some patrons nodded in agreement, while others exchanged uneasy glances. "And the worst part," Elijah continued, his voice dropping in grave, deliberate tone, "is that this doesn't just happen here. It happens everywhere, every day. Sometimes it's subtle, a dismissive look, careless service, a condescending tone. Other times, it's more blatant, but it always leaves a mark." He turned back to Todd. "I gave you the opportunity to correct your behavior. I watched, waiting to see if you'd realize your mistake, but you didn't. And now, everyone here has seen exactly who you are." Todd's fists clenched at his sides, his entire posture shrinking under the weight of Elijah's words. "It doesn't matter what you say now," Elijah said, his voice steady but merciless. "Your actions already spoke for you." Todd lowered his head, unable to withstand the judgment in Elijah's eyes. "Leave," Elijah ordered. Without another word, Todd let his apron slip from his fingers onto the nearest table and hurried toward the exit, disappearing into the night. For a moment, the restaurant remained thick with tension, as if no one knew what to do next. But then, an older woman at a nearby table gave a firm nod of approval. A young man in the corner murmured something to his companion, and gradually the energy in the room shifted. Elijah exhaled and turned to his mother, who had been watching everything with the same quiet grace she had always carried. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice softer now. Mrs. Holloway offered a small, pat-knowing smile. "I always was, son," she replied. "I was just waiting to see how you would handle it." Elijah let out a quiet chuckle, shaking his head. "I suppose I passed the test." His mother reached out, squeezing his hand warmly. "More than that, you gave everyone here a lesson they won't forget." Elijah returned the gesture with a firm squeeze of his own, then straightened, scanning the restaurant. "Dana," he called. The manager stepped forward immediately. "I'll be holding a staff meeting tomorrow," he announced. "This will not happen again." Dana nodded with conviction. "Understood, Mr. Holloway. I'll do everything I can to ensure it." Elijah cast one last glance around the room. He knew that this night would not be forgotten. Not by him, not by his mother, and certainly not by anyone who had witnessed it. Justice doesn't always come in the form of grand speeches or public punishments. Sometimes it arrives through the simple yet undeniable revelation of the truth. And tonight, the truth had been laid bare for all to see. Elijah Holloway remained standing at the front of the restaurant as the last employees gathered their things and headed out for the night. The weight of the day's events still lingered in the air, but it was different now. The energy in the room felt lighter, as if something fundamental had shifted, not just in the way the staff worked, but in the way they understood their role within these walls. Mrs. Holloway stood by the entrance, her hands neatly folded over her purse, waiting for her son. She had watched him navigate this situation with the same patience and wisdom she had always instilled in him. Now, as the restaurant quieted, she could see the reflection of that wisdom in his eyes, determination mixed with a newfound clarity. "How do you feel?" she asked, tilting her head slightly as she observed him. Elijah let out a slow breath, rolling his shoulders as if trying to release the tension that had settled there. "I think we did something good today." His mother gave him a knowing smile, the kind only a woman who had seen the world change slowly, step by step, could give. "You did. But remember, true change isn't measured in a single moment. It's measured in what you do every day after that." He nodded, absorbing the weight of her words. It was true. The confrontation with Todd, the meeting with his employees, even the gratitude from the customers who had witnessed it all, those were just the beginning. The real challenge was making sure this moment wasn't just a passing lesson but the foundation of something lasting. As they stepped outside, the crisp night air wrapped around them, carrying the distant hum of the city. Portland had always been a place of progress and diversity, but even here, moments like this proved that there was still work to be done. Mrs. Holloway linked her arm through her son's as they walked toward the parking lot. "You know," she mused, "I wasn't upset about the wait." Elijah glanced at her, raising an eyebrow. "No?" she chuckled softly. "I've been waiting all my life, son, waiting for people to realize that respect isn't something to be granted selectively, that dignity isn't a privilege, it's a right." He let those words settle in, realizing just how deep this moment ran for her. For all the time she had been overlooked, dismissed, or treated as less than. This was more than just about tonight. It was about every night that had come before it. They reached his car, and he turned to her with a small smile. "Well, at least tonight, you didn't have to wait alone." His mother squeezed his arm affectionately. "No, I didn't." As Elijah opened the car door for her, he glanced back at the restaurant, its windows glowing warmly against the darkened streets. He saw more than just a business. He saw a responsibility, a legacy, and a chance to shape something better, not just for himself, but for everyone who walked through those doors. And with that, he knew his work was only just beginning. That night, as the restaurant dimmed its lights and the last employees said their goodbyes, Elijah stood by the entrance for a moment, taking in the space he had built. It was more than just a place to serve meals. It was a reflection of the values his mother had instilled in him: respect, dignity, and fairness. The incident with Todd had not only been a turning point for the staff, but also for the customers who had witnessed it. People left the restaurant with more than just a well-prepared meal. They walked away with a story, a lesson about the importance of speaking up against injustice. How many times do moments like this happen unnoticed? How often does silence allow discrimination to persist? But tonight, someone had said enough. Elijah had not only stood up for his mother, but he had set a precedent in his restaurant and left a lasting impression on everyone present. And now, this story reaches you. What would you have done in his place? If this message inspired you, comment with the number 1. If you think there are ways to improve, comment with the number 2. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories that remind us of the power of integrity. Thank you for being with us, and we'll see you in the next story, filled with emotions and lessons worth remembering.